Well, good afternoon and welcome to How Design Online. I am just thrilled to have you here. We're having, so we are excited today to be with Scott Talbot and Caleb Hepler. They are presenting on behalf of Lucid Software, Lucid Press, Lucid Chart, lots of Lucids, but they will be sharing about seeing the bigger picture, 5 tips to improving creative team management. So I'm thrilled that you're here. I hope everyone's having a great week. We were just talking before we started about this crazy world in which we live, but we are going to be doing an incredible digital session. And enjoy. I am Amy Conover, and I am the content and show director for How Events, and just thrilled again to have you all with us. Before we get started, I'm going to just share some housekeeping slides, if you will. So if you're listening to the session, you just make sure that your computer device is available, unmuted, and the volume is turned up to an acceptable level. If you have any problems, just do the test my system now, and that should help. But oftentimes just disconnecting and rejoining works. If you do have any questions, next slide, segue here. If you have questions about the connection or anything like that while we're going through it, any tech related, put them in the how to ask questions box, which basically is a box to the left of your screen that says ask a question. And our tech team will answer those right away. But also we will be having a Q&A with Scott and Caleb after the session. So please put your questions in there. We can take them at the end, but if you want to ask them or just, throw them in there throughout the session, that just makes it easier. And that way we can hit the ground running when it comes to the Q&A time. So let me tell you just quickly about Lucid Press. Lucid Press is a brand templating platform that empowers anyone to create and distribute on-brand marketing content. Their comprehensive template gallery features hundreds of professionally designed options for you and your team members to choose from, while the Brand Asset Hub and advanced template locking help you build a stronger brand presence through consistency and customization. So now just a little bit about our speakers. Scott Talbot is the art director at Lucid Press, and has 7 years of design experience. He knows all too well the pain of brand inconsistency and wasted design time. He's passionate about developing and promoting powerful brands and helping small creative teams punch their weight. In his spare time, Scott loves camping in the Wasatch Mountains, I hope I said that right, with his family and dabbling in photography. So let's learn a little bit about Caleb. Caleb is the creative director for Lucid Chart, which is a visual workspace that combines diagramming, data visualization, and collaboration. Caleb spearheaded a viral video campaign in which he used Lucid Chart to explain doggos and other internet memes, generating over 350 million views. Phew, can't even say it, it's so many. Prior to Lucid Chart, Caleb worked in advertising, editing television, and web commercials for brands such as Geico, McDonald's, Capital One, Kraft, Fiat, and many others. Looks like to me, all Caleb does is work, because I have nothing fun to share about Caleb. So he is just hyper-focused and doesn't get out and camp or do anything else, I guess. I don't know.
About right.
But
anyway, just stay right here.
He just stays right there, all buttoned up working. So anyway, I just want to welcome Scott and Caleb. And again, thanks to Lucid Press. I'm going to hop off now, and I will be back for our Q&A. So you guys take it from here.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yes, again, thank you everyone for coming and for joining us for this webinar. Again, I am, well, the webinar is 5 tips to improve creative management. I'm an art director, Caleb's a creative director. So this is focused towards creative leadership, but also anyone who works in the creative field who is looking to improve their skills or move up in their career. We hope that you'll be able to find useful information in this webinar as well. So Amy did a great job of introducing us. Again, I'm Scott Talbot, art director at Lucid Press. There's a lot of Lucid going on here. Caleb and I work for the same company, but we work on sister products. So we're technically part of 2 different branches of the company, and we don't work directly together, but we brush shoulders a lot, I guess you could say. Yeah. I've been here for almost 4 years. Before that, I worked in advertising. So I come from the agency side before I came over here. And Yeah, I love it. Caleb, anything else you want to add?
No, I mean, I've been, Amy's intro is great. So I've been working at Lucid for about the same amount of time, but probably worthwhile for all of you to know is maybe the differences in teams. Because I think that's where in this webinar that we're going to do, it would be helpful. Scott comes from a slightly smaller team, and then our team for Lucid Chart is 9 to 10 people. So some slightly different dynamics there, which is maybe helpful in terms of how we're answering the questions.
Yeah, that's true. My team consists of myself, a graphic designer, a developer, and 2 writers. So my team's a little bit smaller. Our product that we're working on is smaller, so it's a little more scrappy, maybe represents like a startup, even though we're part of a larger company. But I hope that this kind of provides a little bit of a breadth of perspective between like a really small organization and to a more medium-sized organization like Caleb is part of.
Yeah.
So let's dive into this. Oh, and please, if you have any questions, shoot us questions. We love interaction from the audience. We can look at the questions as they come in. We'll also be doing a Q&A session towards the end of the session. Okay, you are in the right place. And to prove it, we're giving away a $25 DoorDash gift card so that you can get yourself some food ordered while you are in Zoom meetings all day. So at the end of the webinar, we're going to be picking a name and giving you a $25 gift card. So you can look forward to that. Anything else before we get started, Caleb?
Let's go.
Okay. So the big question I want to, the overarching question I want to answer here is how can you help your creative team reach their potential and create great work? I think that's something that at our core, creative leadership really wants for their team, at least I would hope, right, is not just for ourselves, but you want the people on your team to excel. So I've broken it up into 5 sections, and we're going to talk through each one and see what we can discover. Melissa says pick her for the gift card. We'll see what happens. Let's dive into the tips. So before we get started with the first one, I just want to do a quick survey. So this is going to pop up for you. Do you feel a personal connection with your reports or your leadership? So that's if you are like a creative director or maybe a graphic designer or a writer. Do you feel a personal connection? So I'm going to send that to the audience. And I'm really interested to see what comes back. We're going to leave that up for maybe 30 seconds.
Especially in, virtual world, right? Like how connected are you, right now after being months away, right? Yeah,
it's definitely different. We want to be sure not to make this like the COVID webinar. I think we've had a lot of those, but it definitely still it plays into everything we're working on right now. Yeah. Okay, we are done. Send results to the audience. I think that's great. We should get that now. So most of you says, yes, we've got a great working relationship. A quarter of you, I guess, kind of, we get by. And then just a handful of you know, look, there's a lot to do. Who's got the time, right? All right. So let's dive into that's good that so many of you have a great relationship. And maybe some of you wish you could have a better one. So the first tip is to connect one-on-one with the people on your team. And that might seem obvious, but especially, at least for me, as I move into leadership roles that require a different amount of work and different kinds of work, it can become harder and harder to stay focused on those, what used to be a really easy and casual relationship to have with the people who are at your same level. It can get harder as you move into a leadership role. And so to kind of introduce this idea, the sub thought here, build relationships that matter. I just want to share a story about here at Lucid Press, we recently had a new general manager come onto the product. I guess this was a couple of years ago now, but he was brand new. A lot of us had already known each other for quite a while. We were already friends. He came on. He wanted to be able to connect with people, make sure that he knew us. And something that he did that was really pretty impressive is that he took time with each person to discover something they were interested in. And for me, it was cars. I'm a big car fanatic. I wish I could say I knew how to work on cars, but I don't really. But I know an absurd amount about cars and car history. And he picked up on that, and he said, well, I actually have this, I drive an older Chevy Malibu. I'm looking for a new car. What would you suggest? And then I gave him some suggestions, and then he actually said, hey, I thought this one was interesting. Do you want to go do a test drive? Should we go check it out? And it was a small thing, but it gave us time, one-on-one, to be able to talk about where he was coming from, get to know each other better, but also showed that he cared about me personally and that he took time to notice something that I was interested in. And I think that went a long ways to building trust right away. And I really appreciated that about what he did. Caleb, for you, your team, when you first came on, the team over at Lucidchart was pretty small, and it's grown quite a bit. And you've had some, turnover with some people moving on to different jobs and hiring new people. How are you figuring out how to build a relationship that matters with all of that change?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. I think, there's personality types where it's very easy to it's just second nature, right? To just build that relationship. It's just built in. But I think for many of us, especially, with the amount of work that we have to do and how busy it is, it has to be an intentional thing to build that relationship, right? And without it feeling, stodgy and stale, right? Or forced. But it has to be an intentional thing. So for me, it's certainly making sure that with new people coming in, with any sort of turnover, that we're folding new team members into basically the cultural norms that have to do with relationships. So whether that's at our work, right, it's certainly such that the standard is to do weekly one-on-ones, right, and making sure we maintain that cadence. Skip level one-on-ones as well are a great thing to do that I've started to do with some people on the team that I don't get to meet with on the regular.
Just if people don't know, what is a skip level one-on-one?
So let's say that, as a creative director, I've got somebody who's fantastic and is leading the entire, design team, right? An art director that's a senior and is able to lead the entire design team. Well, before him, I had these relationships with individuals on that team, just, maybe entry-level designers. And with that person in there who's now managing and doing those weekly one-on-ones, I don't get to have that personal connection. But being the size team that we are of about 10 people or, around there, it's still really beneficial to have that one-on-one connection, I think. So being able to say hey, every month, why don't you and I, it doesn't have to be anything overly formal, but let's you and I connect and just kind of talk about, as you were mentioning with your example, Scott, what are you interested in? What gets you out of bed in the morning? What do you care about? So I think those things are really important. The things that are, kind of built into the structure of your week, but then also just, making sure that you're opening up time to get to know each other as a group as well, right? And especially with right now, again, don't want to make this a whole COVID-19 kind of special, but we have to be really intentional about saying we don't get to sit and eat lunch together. We don't get to, gather around the ping pong table or foosball table like we did. So let's set aside time every other day or something like that just to jump into a Zoom meeting and say hi, play a game, just, continue to build that relationship.
Yeah, we actually just got a question in from Jess that says, any tips for staying well connected on that personal level with your team while remote? And that's, you're kind of talking about that, but is there any more you can say? I mean, you just hired 2 or 3 new devs, and so you're onboarding people in Zoom world, right? So can you talk about more about that experience?
Happy to, yeah. So we brought them on, I think, in mid-June in July. And so what we've done since then is just basically we do team activities. And this is another thing that it's just kind of part of the workplace norms, right? One-on-ones, team activities and stuff like that. So we're very intentional about saying, hey, for this next team activity, we're going to do some like personality activities. Let's really get to know each other, right? And bring them into this very tight-knit group of people that already exists. And we were certainly also very intentional about saying, hey, new people, typically you'd be eating lunch with us. Typically, we'd be kind of showing you around the office. Well, given the current circumstances, let's all meet in we call it a post-lunch social. And it's just a time where we don't want to be really eating lunch together because it's a little gross over video. I think the audio gets a little bit bad. But after lunch, like, we'll all jump into this Zoom meeting. We'll play, a game, whether it's we play code names, or we'll play, this Pictionary game, or we'll play, brain teasers, or just catch up on the weekend. And that's been a really good way to bring people on, even though we're working remote.
Yeah, I want to kind of put an exclamation point on this, that we do have scheduled one-on-ones every week. And that's something that comes from our corporate culture, but I think is so effective. At a previous company I worked at, we never had any sort of one-on-one or performance reviews. I was like almost 2 years into this company when I finally had a performance review, even though I asked for one. And it was positive, but it really made me feel like, was I important enough to like discuss things with? And it always made me feel like, where do I stand with you? Am I doing good work? Am I moving forward in my career? And it was hard those are hard questions to like broach and to ask as someone who's, asking their manager. But if you have consistent one-on-ones every week for a half an hour, that makes it really easy to say, like, we already have this time. This is the time to discuss things, that you need to talk to your reports to your manager about. And so some of those tougher questions are easier to tackle. We've got some more great questions coming in. We got to be cognizant of time, but I also want to cover a couple of these really fast. So Samantha asked, what do you discuss in your one-on-ones? So one-on-ones can be a time to get project updates, but more important than that, it's a time to talk about more meaningful things to your reports. So you can talk about their career goals, where they see themselves in 5 years, what they can be doing now to help move their career into the future. You can talk about issues on the team. You can talk about, are there personal issues that may be preventing them from, getting to work on time or things like that. That's a place where you can really have empathy and really stretch yourself to use your position as a manager to help your reports. And that is super, super helpful. Another question, have you guys found a Pictionary game that works with virtual groups? We use Jackbox a lot, which I think you have to buy through Steam, but that's a ton of fun. They have a big variety of games you can use. There's also a couple free ones. It's like the code names. And Caleb, what's the free drawing one?
The free drawing one is just Scribble.io. So Scribbl.io, I think is all it is.
Scribblio,
yeah, something weird like that. But it's great.
Okay, let's keep moving. So the next part of having one-on-one relationships is be a master of feedback. And this was actually a question that was asked a little bit earlier, but how to give effective feedback. And I actually had a creative director once who was notorious for giving feedback along the lines of, that's not quite hitting it for me, or that's not it. I'll know it when I see it. And that is like the worst feedback you could give to your reports. And it's a skill, it's something that can be learned, but learning how to give good feedback. And lots of times feedback means giving some criticism or saying like, this isn't what we're looking for, but taking time to learn how to do that can be so beneficial for your team. Caleb, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I mean, yeah, it's just not hitting it, just like that makes me cringe, right? And something as a creative director, I hope never is the case as I talk to others. But I think the remedy, because that's really bad feedback. It's so subjective. It's so cloudy. It's like, what does that even mean? But the remedy to that isn't no feedback at all, right? We certainly, in creative management, need to be able to provide good feedback. And so that's why I think these things work one-on-one, right? Or hand in hand. If you're having one-on-one relationships with people on your team, if you're talking to them, getting to know them, caring about who they are and how they're developing in their career, it makes it so much easier to have that personal connection and then to candidly give them really helpful feedback, whether it's on a project, the way they're working, just to help them grow. So I think, it's easy for us, or for some of us, right? Maybe some of us are a little bit more direct, but for myself and others, I think it's kind of like, let's let them figure it out, or I don't want to push too far. Let's see what they discover. It takes concentration and time to give really good feedback and to provide that for your team. And so it's a must for me.
Yeah. There's a principle that we use on our team called radical candor, which is basically like being very frank with your team, but also being very caring with your team. Right. So that's like, you have to work on that to build that. You can't just do that in the moment you're giving feedback, but showing you care and then being very frank with the feedback so that it's clear. Otherwise, your reports won't know like what you're asking. Any tips on managing a new report's time without micromanaging, especially if they're afraid to say no? And actually, we're going to get to this a little bit later in the presentation. So thank you for asking that, Ashley. Appreciate that. Okay, we're going to move on to tip number 2, unless you have anything else to add, Caleb.
No, let's do it.
Okay, tip number 2, don't get in the way of your avengers. Your team is your Avengers team. And I put it that way because you want to see your team as a group of superheroes who all have their unique powers and abilities, who all have something to contribute. So we have a couple ideas about how to do that. And the first one is to stay above the fray. And what I mean by that is it can get, especially when you come from like being a graphic designer or a writer and you're used to doing the day in and day out tasks, and it's called radical candor. If you Google that, there's a few great articles about that, radical candor. So staying above the fray is not getting too involved in the nitty-gritty day-to-day production activities, right? The individual contributor responsibilities, because even though you are very used to that, you've been doing that for years, you're good at it, that's not your job anymore, and you've moved into a leadership role. Caleb, you went from doing video production and advertising to now you're creative director in-house. What has that transition been like, and have you had to work on staying above the fray?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you're very right in calling out. It's the place where you previously had expertise that is probably the easiest to just kind of slip into the nitty-gritty production and execution details. And so for me with video, it was something that I was working on very in depth for a long time, and then built up a team and like had to really intentionally pass things off to them. And so there's that balance of saying, how do I do this in a way that I'm passing it off so it's not the entire thing and it's not overwhelming, right? As they try to be drinking from a fire hose, but am I taking constant steps to say, this is yours, this is yours, this is yours, and keeping myself out of the weeds, as it were. That said, I think it's also really important to think through, depending on your situation, that given your expertise, your background, your experience, your role, there might be areas where it is worthwhile to say, hey, I'm uniquely qualified for this, but just figure out a way to do that while enabling your team in the long run, right? So it isn't always going to be on your shoulders perpetually. So it's a balance, I think, but certainly the long-term goal should be let your Avengers do it.
Yeah, we had that question a little earlier about what do you do with like entry level positions and how do you help them go? The fact is that lots of times with entry level positions, it's gonna go a little bit slower than you know how to do it. Right? Like if you jumped in, you could do it. But for you and for the report, the best long-term strategy is to let them do it and maybe do it different than you would. And it can be hard to let go of that control. It's just natural to want to be like, I know how to do this. I'm just going to do it. Right.
Totally.
And go ahead.
I was going to jump in there because it's hard to letting go of that control. I think another good point about this, why is it difficult, I think, to enable your team all the time? We have an emotional connection with the work that we do, right? Like something that, is if you step into some sort of leadership role on a creative team and you're kind of tasked with handing something off, there's a bit of an emotional thing where it's like, well, it's kind of part of who I am or what I do. It's how I identify myself. So letting go of that is something that, it takes a little bit of conscientiousness to do it right and to be okay with enabling somebody else to do it and do it how they would do it, right? And if the results are the same, it's just a matter of how they get there and being okay with that.
Yeah. I had a creative director once who was super good at the ability to, always stay above the fray. But when it came down to like, I don't know how to fix this, me as the graphic designer, I don't know what to do. And he just had this awesome ability to just sit down next to me, pull up a chair, pull out a piece of paper and start sketching out stuff. And usually that was like all that was needed to break through my like block. And in that moment, right, he was working on the really minute thing that I was struggling with, but it wasn't taking away the responsibility of the project. And I think that ability to like jump in, be a partner with the person on that in the weeds work, and then jump out is really, really valuable.
No, that's great.
We got a question. Is there a way to straddle high level work and in the weeds work, especially for those in smaller companies or startups that often create a dual role, i.e. designer, copywriter, and creative director? I am in that exact position right now. I'm an art director. I have a management role. I also do a lot of in the weeds work. And that can be a challenge splitting that time. Definitely. I feel that every day. And lots of times I can feel myself getting in the zone of in the weeds work, right? So recently I've been doing some animation, some like After Effects animation work, which requires a lot of hours, just like, cranking out hours of work. And it's really easy. And it's actually nice to get lost in that work. And that feels like home for me because that's what I've been doing for years. And it takes specific effort to plan out both on my schedule and on my to-do list to tackle management issues. And maybe it would be different for somebody else, but taking the time to set up systems so that I have to get my management work done, which is, I love my team. I like managing them. It just doesn't come as naturally to me as the creative work does. I hope that helps answer that question. The next thought is you are not a project manager. Caleb, do you want to dive into this one?
Yeah, this is a great one. I mean, it's so easy, especially as we're talking about like managing a creative team and so much of that, right, depending on the size of your team and what's at hand and the volume of work, it is so easy to kind of slip into, well, my role is basically becoming project management and that's it. Because in order for our team to just like keep moving, in order for us to like do, significant work, I've got to fill this role, right? And so I think it's a cautionary thing because, at some point, and I think we'll probably kind of hash this out, especially with smaller teams, that there might be a level of that, but to understand that that is not your primary role, right? And so I think there was a position that we were in where it was like, oh, do we hire another designer? And I was very adamant of like, let's build out a project management team further. And I think from Scott, I think you have some great examples of past times where it was like, given that choice, the amount of efficiency that can come not only as a creative leader, but as a team member, as a designer or somebody who's on video or a copywriter, I mean, the output can just like skyrocket when you're not dealing with those minute tasks of just like making sure that the logistics are right or that the planning is such and all that kind of stuff. So it's one of those things that, if possible, offload that as much as you can.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you're referring to. At one of the ad agencies I worked at, the creative team was just swamped, and we could not keep up with the amount of work we were getting. We were having to work late every night, and there's nothing more maddening, than a couple account managers rolling into your cubicle at 4:30 with a drink in their hand, a little buzzed already, and saying like, "Oh, is that project going to get done tonight?" And just like, it's made me like so mad. And so I kept asking, like, we need more designers. We can't keep up. And what the partners actually ended up doing was hiring a project manager, which at first I thought, like, what are you doing? We don't need a project manager. But but what happened was all of these requests disappeared like overnight because we needed somebody to ask why. Like, why do we need this thing? Does this match? Right. Does this match our goals? Does this match what the client really needs or wants? And as soon as someone was there to ask questions and to push back a little bit, all of a sudden, all these requests evaporated. Mm-hmm. And I cannot speak enough about the value of a project manager. They can completely overhaul your workflow and make things so much easier. Now at this moment on my team, we're small enough, we don't have a project manager. And right. So I'm kind of dealing with that right now. Like, how do I balance those two things? And one of the things we've had to do is to lean on other people on our marketing team to kind of act as project managers, and to get that role off of our plate so that we're not having to filter everything and move projects around in Asana and like make that all happen, because if you do too much project management work, you're never going to get the creative work in, and that's really where your value is in being creative. Yeah, do you have any other thoughts to add to that?
No, and I think you're better suited to answer that question really well, because you're in that position of having to balance that a little bit more which is probably where a lot of people are, where balancing that role without having a specific project manager, right? It's a little bit more hairy, a little bit more of a gray area. But I think you're spot on to say, how do we share this? What are the areas where I really need to be asking those questions? Be the one who's asking, like, why do we need this, or why does this matter? But really primarily focusing on your role, and that is the creative work.
Yeah, absolutely. Which actually leads right into our next section, and we're going to kick it off with a question. Do you have a clear creative vision? And I'm talking about on your team, you yourself. Do you know where your team is headed? Do you know where your work is headed? Do you have a clear creative vision for yourself and your team and the company you're working with? So I'm going to launch that survey right now. We'll give about 30 seconds to respond to that. Again, I'm talking about, this can be you personally, how you understand the vision on your team. Do you feel like you have a direction you're going in? Let's see here. Okay, so 20%, crystal clear. Our vision inspires my work every day. 60%, I have a general idea, we're working on it. And then 16%, no, it's a mess. Who knows what we're supposed to be doing? I'm super pumped for the 23% of you that have a crystal clear vision. And I think a lot of companies struggle, and a lot of creative teams struggle to have a clear creative vision of where they're going. So let's dive into that a little bit. A quick question from Brian. Are your marketing teams and creative teams separated into two teams or under one team inside a department? My team is, the creative team is a subset of the marketing team over at Lucid Press. That's how it is over at Lucid Chart, right?
Yeah, that is. And it may be worth distinguishing in terms of the marketing teams. There's a Lucid Chart marketing team and a Lucidchart creative team under that, and a Lucid Press marketing team and a Lucid Press creative team under that. So they are distinct.
Yeah. Yep. So getting back to these results from the survey, casting a clear vision. So part of your job as a creative director is to take the information that you have from the client or from the company, the goals of the company, the business strategy, even the marketing information can be fuzzy a lot of the times, and to break that information down and to cast a vision that people can grab onto. So the first part of this is going to be to break it down. I've found that business strategy and marketing strategy rarely lends itself to easy creative solutions. And it takes the job of the creative director to identify, like, where can you get a handhold, like where can you get some traction on something to turn it into creative work. Does that resonate for you, Caleb?
Yeah. I mean, the thing I think about with this is the amount of questions that I need to ask to get to the point where I can digest it and understand how to translate that to something that the team can grasp onto, right? Like that, it takes a lot of questions and a lot of digging, which I think is part of your role of understanding the entire context so that you can put a creative, angle on it. And so the other thing that I add to this, in terms of, breaking it down for your team, sometimes we think about casting the vision and it has to be like, we think about, that's something that's for somebody who's really charismatic or outgoing or a really great, presenter, has a lot of presence. And I think that's not always the case, right? It doesn't really matter if you're that way, which is great, or if you're a little bit more on the introverted side or a little bit more methodical or logical or something like that, right? Break it down in the way that you are most adept to being able to do, right? And no matter what, as long as you're still casting a vision for your team in whatever form, that's really what it's all about. It doesn't have to be in a certain way or form. It just has to be there and do it in the way that's natural to you, and that is going to be accessible and usable for your team.
Yeah, that's so true. Creative directors do not need to be able to create a cult of personality. You don't need to be charismatic. You just have to be able to do creative work. So we got a couple questions coming in. How do you get your marketing director to help define that vision? And I just built my creative team, just me and a team of 7. We want a vision, but I'd love my team to help with the creation of this vision. So for the marketing directors, at least in my experience working with marketing teams, it's going to be a little bit broader. There's going to be a lot of marketing speak that tries to cover as many aspects of the product or the business as possible. So there's going to be a lot there. I'm sure all of you have heard of the, Begin with Why by Simon Sinek. I would definitely start there as a common language to be able to cut down the amount of business speak into a succinct, core message about what your product or company is about and the message that you're trying to get to people. In terms, and for a marketing director, there is kind of this point where the marketing director is going to want to define all of these things about the company, the features, all the personality traits, all of the mission statement, right? But really what the creative team needs is just a small slice of what is it that we want to impact in our customers' lives, right? So the small piece of why are we doing this? And from there, that can explode into a lot of different creative work. The question about the helping your team, I think the team being involved in the vision process is super. The Begin with Why author is Simon Sinek, Sinek. He also has a TED Talk where he talks about it. That's really great. Mm-hmm. Simon Sinek. So having your team involved is really good. The only thing is that can turn into design by committee. And so you need to be able to do a lot of pre-work to give guidance and options about where it can go, and you have to do a lot of the homework before going into that meeting. I hope that helps. So one more part of this casting a vision is to say one thing. And say one thing has become like a life mantra for me. The name of the book is, sorry, we're getting a couple of more questions coming in. The name of the book is Begin with Why by Simon Sinek. So say one thing is something I learned in advertising. You're going to want to say a lot of things about your product because your product or company is the best and it's awesome and it has all these great features and you want to say everything, but in order for it to be effective, you just got to say one thing. And I've been able to put this into work in real life. I have a 4-year-old son who, when it comes to discipline or explaining things, I found I have to be as simple and crystal clear as possible. And I can only get one message across at a time. If I try to do a full-on lecture like my dad used to do to me all the time, it's not going to get across and he's not going to understand, and he's just going to hate the process of being lectured more than listening to what I have to say. And the fact is, consumers have about the same attention span as a 4-year-old kid, so it's like a great metaphor of where to go. So when you are doing your creative work, casting your vision, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but try to boil everything down to one thing. So much of marketing or business speak wants to include more things, right? We do this and this and this, and you're going to feel this and this and this. And at the end of the day, you're going to be all of these things. And that gets so messy so fast. You have to break things down and get to the core of the one thing you want your customer to know about you and to feel after interacting with you. Any thoughts about that, Caleb?
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. And I think the thing is I think most creatives, right, will just buy right into that. Like, that's what they want to do. That's how they want to focus their work onto that one thing. And so I think in terms of casting the vision, and you think about boiling it down to one thing, it's really, really helpful to take that skill and apply it to the internal stakeholders that you're working with, if you're in an in-house, creative team, or your client, right? And helping them understand. And this is something that, from personal experience, we continue to work on with stakeholders that we're working with, but helping them understand, if we say everything, we say nothing at all, right? And bring them along for that, because they especially are working in, to put it in terms like kind of a bubble of that product and everything it does and all the information about that. So being able to kind of step outside that and help them understand, we need to be able to kind of focus in and hone in on the most important things. Let's prioritize what needs to be said, is a helpful activity for you to do, not just with your team, but for stakeholders and clients as well.
Absolutely. Great question coming in from Samantha. If your marketing manager doesn't have any experience in defining a vision, how do you help direct them to define that vision if every time they throw the hierarchy chart at you because you are their direct report? Mm-hmm. This is definitely a tough situation. And I've been in similar situations before, and it's all about education. And that can be hard because it's your manager, right? It's the person you report to. But unfortunately, the burden is on you to bring information that can help educate your manager about how things could be done better. It's slipping my mind. For some reason, I can only think of the Start With Why TED Talk. That'd be super helpful. If you've listened to anything by Stephen Gates, that's super good. He's creative director over at Envision. But if you've listened to his podcast or any of his talks, he does tons of great. He's done all in-house work. And so he knows that kind of internal politics backwards and forwards. I would definitely dive into his stuff to get more information about how to navigate, educating other people in the company and getting creative work put as a priority in your company. So hope that helps. Let's move on to tip number 4. tip number 4 is to leverage your position. So moving into a leadership position puts you in a unique spot to be able to do things for your team that they could never have done themselves. And I want to, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Sorry about that. I just checked the time and realized we only have 14 minutes left. And I was like, oh no, we have so much to plow through. So we'll try to go quick here. So when you're a creative director, you have access to things and access to people that your team doesn't. And I have noticed in my own experience, I know the creative directors that have leveraged their position to make things better for the team. And so the first one on that is to go to bat for your team. I had a creative director once who let all the complaints and criticisms and upset feelings about anything that was going on between the team and the requesters in the company to just like go straight on through. And so you've got entry-level graphic designers dealing with, you know, senior level requesters who are upset about something not getting through. And it's because the creative director didn't want to have tough conversations with people. He didn't want to go to bat for his team. And I firmly believe that the creative director should be there to protect his team in a way, right? Or her team, and to be the person that can soak up the criticism. If someone is having an issue with creative work that is being done, they need to go to the creative director. They shouldn't be going to individual contributors. Obviously, there's room for collaboration. You want healthy collaboration between everybody in your company or between you and your client. But but those sticky conversations, the creative director needs to be taking that load off of their team so they don't need to deal with that. And I think that is one of the biggest positive things a creative director can do. And I think part of that is when your team is having trouble, when they fail, when they make mistakes, it is the creative director's fault. When the team succeeds and does great work, it is the team's fault, right? Or the team's like success, right? And I think that I have, in my own experience of having creative directors and leadership, that makes like night and day difference on the team trusting you and the team's like morale going forward. Sorry, that was a lot, Caleb. Do you have? No, that's great. What else do you? Yeah, what do you think?
I think you're spot on. I think that needs to be your default, is to say, yes, I'm going to be on the front lines for the team, right? And make sure that, they're not just getting pummeled in any way, shape, or form. And I think it's an interesting dynamic, though, if we go back even to kind of talking about like, trusting your team, they're your avengers and like, right, utilizing them. There is that balance probably of saying, in what ways do I allow team members? I actually consciously take a step back to say part of your development is engaging with that stakeholder and kind of going back and forth and figuring this out. But I think that has to be an intentional move, and it has to be the right dynamic and the right place. And maybe it's, similar to what we talked about, you're kind of going along with, but understanding where is this a place where this is developmental and they can handle it and you're right alongside, and where you just need to say, you know what, no, I'm going to just jump on out and go ahead and handle this and go to bat for the team. So it's just another thing to consider in that one.
Yeah, I had an experience with an ad agency where we went and met with a client and we showed the creative work, and the client was basically like, this is like not what we asked for. And the client was kind of upset. We had a good relationship with them, but they were kind of like, this isn't it at all. And I remember one of the partners saying, I'm sorry, I missed the mark on this one. We can do better. I could have done better, right? And so like the partner, who actually didn't really have anything to do with the creative work, he instantly took responsibility for the work and said like, I'll do better. And I really look up to him for doing that, because he didn't have to. He could have turned to us and said like, why did it come out this way? Or like, right. Or like, I'll make sure they do better next time, something like that. Yep. But all right. So the next section is cross collaborate. As you, especially in-house, I think this is something that I've noticed, is that in a leadership position, you have unique access to people in other parts of the company. So software, your software development team, your sales team, your customer success team, and that gives you a unique vantage point and a political viewpoint within the company to be able to find opportunities to collaborate and to find new and creative ways to support your creative work. Does that make sense to Caleb? I know you've went from, you were video production to now you're creative director. Where have you seen that work?
It's definitely something to really dig into for the sake of your team, right? And I think, again, it's another place where digging in is to the benefit of you and everybody else on the creative team. The way I think about it is my biggest takeaway, right? In terms of working with others, especially in an in-house instance, and like you said, all these other departments and finding things out and all the politics of things or all the, business aspects of things, is don't assume that information is getting cascaded outside of anyone but you. Right? We really need to make sure if you're in a leadership position to say, it's probably unlikely that this would trickle down to my team. I want to really make sure that this is verbalized, and making sure that it's communicated to your team in a way that they can understand that and that they, get that angle as well. So I think that's the biggest thing. Don't assume that they're getting this information elsewhere.
That's great insight. I think sometimes it can feel like if your creative director isn't passing along information, it can feel like they're withholding information. Like you're not worthy to know what's going on in the other parts of the company. And so I think being that person that can keep your team included in everything else that's going on in the company is worthwhile.
Totally.
Tip number 5, perfect your process. And this kind of connects back to don't be a project manager. Perfecting your process can do a lot to prevent you from having to do a lot of that nitty gritty work of project management. So the first part is better briefs. And Caleb, I want you to tackle this first, because I know that when you came on as creative director, there wasn't a lot of great processes going on. Can you talk about your effort to improve that?
Yeah, I think it's just indicative of the size and the growth, right? And this is kind of where it's going to be. If it's a smaller team, you can probably get away with you just shout over your shoulder, hey, I need this or I need that, right? And the entire team, the entire company even might be in the same, room as you. But as we grew, we kind of saw these things are really falling apart. And so instituting better briefs, instituting timelines that are standardized, instituting all sorts of basically checkpoints for stakeholders to understand what we need in order to get started was absolutely vital. Putting those things into place and really establishing them. And then as a creative leader, sticking to them and then explaining the rationale and the need behind them is really, really important to get people's buy-in. So that was a huge thing that really has set us up. And honestly, this is an ongoing process, right? Briefs and processes. It's just an ongoing thing that we need to continue to scale up as we grow.
Absolutely. I want to clarify, when we're talking about briefs, we're talking about creative briefs, right? And you can Google different examples of creative briefs. So basically, a brief is everything boiled down so that your creative team can do exactly what they need to on a specific project, right? So if a project comes in, it needs to have a brief that says, the factual things like, we are going to this event. We need these items. They need to be this size. Here's a link to the things we're getting printed. Here are examples of things we've done before. And then it needs to say the challenge we're facing is, and then we've never gone to this kind of event before and we're targeting a new audience. And then the insight, which is, we think this audience would really like our product because of X, Y, and Z. And using the brief as a gateway to be able to say, hey, here's the brief. Let's fill it out. Can you not answer all the questions? Okay, then you should go back and figure out your answers to these. And then it's because the creative brief can be used as a third-party gateway to say, you need to figure this stuff out before we get started on our projects.
Yeah. And that's exactly what we're running into, right? We were just then the design team, they would just be either creating things that would then be well, you never, and coming up with things that then stakeholders would be well, you never told us this, or they'd be spending all their time chasing stuff. So that's exactly right. It really is a gateway.
Yeah. One of the questions coming in, how do you get your team on board with briefs when you're at a small company and the owners have rejected the concept of them? That is a tough question. And to be honest, I'm not sure. Again, you might have to customize your situation so that the brief is less lengthy or is less formidable. And to answer another question coming in, who should write a brief? When I was at an ad agency, our account managers wrote the brief. Now I help write the brief because it becomes a conversation, right? So I can sit down. Lots of times the requester has a bunch of information available, but then we have a kickoff meeting and we can use the creative brief as a framework in that kickoff meeting to say, do we know all of these things? And so we kind of write it together, and then I can make sure that all of the questions are answered and that it's actionable material. Yeah. I'm not sure what you do when you're at a small company and they've rejected the company brief, except maybe repackage it and trick them into believing it is just a meeting where we're casually talking about all these different aspects.
Right. I was going to say, just put it into things that they understand, right? Like cater it to their objectives, right? And if it's really just about gathering that context that you need to do your job correctly and make great work that, benefits the business or whatever, right? So it's maybe the way that you just angle it.
Yeah. So another question, we had to call them project request forms. The creative brief scared off the other teams. Yes.
Creativity at its best. That's fantastic.
Yes. Let's see, we're getting pretty close on time, and then we'll go into a Q&A session. I hope to answer some of these other questions that are coming in. So the next part is to automate as much as possible. And so some examples of things that we've done to automate our work is we have a Google form tied to Asana so that when someone wants, a project done, they can fill out as much information as possible, it automatically puts the project into Asana and prompts us to create a kickoff meeting. And so then that way we can get a lot of that work done beforehand, and that process also helps the requesters know what to expect. Another part of automation is we try to templatize as much work as we can, which means a little bit of work in the front end to make less work in the back end. And a little plug here for Lucid Press, which I feel like I have to do. Lucid Press is all about templatizing design work. We use it all the time to make it easier for requesters to be able to get what they need in a timely fashion. In fact, we have a saying at Lucid Press called "Make your own damn flyer," which is actually a quote from one of our customers who said, we want this form, but we just need the date changed out. And we wanted to create templates so that people could make their own things quickly and efficiently, or as we like to say it, make your own damn flyer. Like, you can do that. We don't need, we have bigger problems on our hands now. Like, we need to do big creative work. We can't be doing small things like that.
Yeah.
Just to answer a couple questions here, the workflow software we use is Asana, ASANA.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that's right. The software we use is Lucid Press, as you've seen the logo on the slide. But yeah, we are just about out of time. Sorry we had to rush at the end there. But Caleb, any last thoughts you want to add?
No, I think let's just kind of move on to the recap, and we'd love to answer questions if we have time.
Okay, so the takeaways: 1, connect one-on-one. 2, don't get in the way of the Avengers. Cast the vision. Leverage your position and perfect the process. So before we get to the Q&A, thank you so much for everyone for coming. We're going to have a Q&A session. We're going to get back to these questions that people have asked that we haven't been able to answer yet. We do want to do a little promotion. Lucid Press is doing another webinar coming up in September. 9 most common templating mistakes organizations make. That is my boss right there, Director of Marketing. So make sure you go. Help me out here. And then we will also be at the How Design live virtual conference, which everyone should absolutely go to because How is awesome. And huge shout out to them for putting this on and allowing us to speak. That's in November. And then finally, let's get into the Q&A.
Hey, I'm back. What you got? First of all, this was incredible. Just the information that you shared, and I took so many notes that I wanted to kind of point out, but I'm not going to because we have a lot of questions, and I love how you answered them intermittently throughout the session. I think that was awesome. But looks like we have a few here. So this is from Jessica. Oh, whoops, people are moving them all around for me. Hold on. How do you walk the line between friends and employees you connect with if your team reports to you as a manager?
Yes, your situation definitely changes when you become a manager. It's a little bit different because when you're in a management position, you represent the company to your reports, which can be kind of awkward. I think an important thing to remember is that you can be friends, but from a business perspective, you are different now. You can give feedback, you can give performance reviews, you can affect their pay, you can affect their employment. And so I think you need to be able to be respectful of them and their personal situations, and and try not to pry too much, I would say, right? You don't want to make them feel like they have to give up information or talk about things they're not comfortable with, especially to someone who is now their manager. And that can kind of stink now that you're a management and maybe you were friends with them before. But yeah, that's what I would say. Caleb, what would you say?
Yes, I personally had to go through this, right? Because my previous role was such that I was just one of the team, and then I was offered this creative director role. So that had to shift a little bit. And I think the difference maybe in taking on a creative management role is that, like you were as their friend, you still care about this person. You still really care about who they are and what they want to do and what they want to become and how they want to grow. You just happen to be in a position where, the way in which you're going to nurture their career or the way in which you're going to help them along to understand the business path, right? You're just in a position to affect that more. And so I think for me, it's maybe just a different angle of still caring about them, but it's in a different light.
Mm-hmm. Good answers. Okay. Next question. What are some creative ways you brainstorm with the group virtually, as well as getting the group to interact more?
I can start.
Yeah, go ahead, Caleb.
Yeah. So we actually use our product, Lucid Chart, to brainstorm at times.
There we go. Get that plug in. I love it.
But again, if it's
that's why you're here.
That's why I'm here. If it's in some way, it's basically a canvas through which we can throw ideas out, all be in the same virtual space at the same time, and understanding, throwing out sticky notes or Post-its, and drawing connections to things. So whether it's that or a different kind of collaborative workspace, I think that's a great way to brainstorm, because you still need that. You still need that connection. You still need to bounce ideas off each other and see where things are going. So finding some sort of substitute to do that is really necessary right now.
Yep, totally agree.
Did you want to add anything, or?
Yes, sorry.
I totally agree.
No, I think the reason that works is because when you're on Zoom, you can feel like you're presenting, right? Like right now I'm presenting, but it can feel like you're presenting to your team as well. And everyone's looking at you, and it's weird. And I think having a third-party software for people to look at makes it a lot easier to understand, to not be afraid to share your ideas.
Yeah, good point. That is a good point. I like that. So another question, and let's see, I was going to see Summer. Looks like this is from Summer. My team has so much work right now that taking any amount of time to connect one-to-one seems almost disrespectful, because that will only serve to lengthen our already long days. Have you encountered this conundrum? And because I know you're thinking it, no, we can't increase headcount to lighten individual loads. Summer is ahead of the game. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I have definitely been here. I would say that the one-on-ones, let's reduce it to 15 minutes. Make sure you have a couple ideas that you want to talk about beforehand, but those one-on-ones will pay off in the long run. I, at least for me, we have struggled with like team with meeting bloat on our team, right? Especially going from, we can't just talk to each other really quick while we're sitting next to each other. We have to do a Zoom meeting. I know it's a challenge to reduce the amount of meetings you're doing, and so try to reduce meetings, but I promise, weekly one-on-ones will pay off.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to take some time to organize yourself, right?
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
Caleb.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. It's a front-ended investment, and I think, Scott, you're right on. If it's a crazy time right now, if the volume is just to an extent that it's weekly for 30 minutes just doesn't make sense, start somewhere. Maybe it's every other week for 15 minutes, but at least getting into a rhythm where you're saying, hey, we're going to build that connection is really the place to begin.
Yeah. And actually, it could be a place where you can spot inefficiencies or things that aren't going right and maybe reduce workload a bit. So
Good point. So you did a few shameless Lucid call outs. I just have to take a second. So you mentioned Simon Sinek and his Start With Why book. Simon spoke at How in 2015, and he spoke about that, and also Leaders Eat Last. And so I just love that, you were kind of referencing that. He's got some great work. And then the other one was Stephen Gates, which you mentioned as well. And he does have some awesome things around leadership. So that was my shameless How plug for How speakers that you referenced in your digital session. So I think we are out of time, but did somebody, do one of you want to announce your DoorDash winners?
Yes. So DoorDash winners are for $25 gift card is Ann Drago. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, from the Cleveland Clinic, and Abby Lewis from Prudential. Again, Ann Drago and Abby Lewis. And we will email you the DoorDash gift card either tomorrow or in a couple days. So look for that. I think that's it.
Good deals. I think I'm having some Wi-Fi issues right now, but I think we're good. So I just want to thank everyone for attending. This recorded session will be live on our site. For those that have registered, you'll get a link for it as well. We would love to hear your feedback before you jump off. We've got just a really quick 5-question survey, and a couple of those are specific for Lucid, and just out of respect for the time and energy they put into that, I'd love for y'all to answer those questions. And so we've got more content on our site, How Design Online. We'll be having more digital sessions, and we would love for y'all to be a part of them. That's all I have. Caleb, Scott, thank you so much. And Lucid
Thank you.
Press, all the Lucids, we appreciate your support in this. So
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
have a great
Appreciate
day.
your time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.